Good evening, everyone. Welcome very much to the annual event for the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you here this evening, and we really appreciate all the people who are here with us today. I am Su-Ming Ye. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project. I go by Su-Ming as my first name, she, her pronouns, and as a physical description, I'm an Asian American woman with mid-length dark hair, brown eyes, and lighter skin, wearing a black blazer. Tonight, I just have a few logistics. As you saw, if you saw the scrolling piece, we have closed captioning that you can enable through the Zoom platform. You click on more, and then you should see the closed captioning option. And we also have two ASL interpreters. So thank you very much to those who will be providing ASL interpretation this evening. So if you've joined us, you may be familiar with our work, but if you're not, we are a legal aid organization, part of the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network. And the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project seeks to advance the constitutional and civil rights of people who are incarcerated in Pennsylvania. So you can be in federal prison, state prison, county jail, immigration detention, a state hospital, juvenile detention center, a halfway house, and you would qualify for our services. And our goal is to ensure that everyone is treated humanely and with dignity, according to the Constitution as well as the laws of our state and country. So I just wanted to give you a few highlights of our work this past year, and then I'm going to turn it over to our amazing speakers today. So since the pandemic, a lot of us out here in the community, we've seen a real lessening of restrictions. And in some ways, I've heard a lot of people say we're back to normal or post-COVID. For those of us who are still incarcerated and detained, while some things have changed since the very heart of the pandemic when we were in there, yet many restrictions still remain, and people are living under dire conditions still. And at the same time, what we do is we provide legal help, legal advocacy, and legal representation, both for individuals as well as class actions. So we seek to find justice and provide justice for those who are incarcerated for things that happened in the past as well as things currently. And we also try to make things better through impact litigation, whether that's through a single case or through class actions. So some of our successes this past year include: we obtained a settlement for a woman who was shackled while giving birth. We settled 2 cases on behalf of Black women in separate county jails who had been brutally assaulted by prison guards. We also represented a man with serious mental illness who suffered from multiple disturbing and violent incidents where he was restrained and then subjected to excessive force while he was handcuffed or restrained or in a restraint chair, and at one point had to undergo a forced haircut. We also had a settlement for an incarcerated man with diabetes, where his diabetes was chronically mismanaged. And at one point, there was a grave error that led to his hospitalization due to diabetic ketoacidosis. So this is just a few examples of our successes this past year. And we continue to do the work. One case that's still ongoing, but we won a court order in the beginning of the case mandating a prison to return to a policy that allowed people to buy certain food items so that they could observe their religion on religious holidays, and therefore they could buy the proper food for their religious ceremonial meals. So we do a lot of different things on behalf of our clients. We try to work with the community as well. So we're really delighted that you're here to learn more about our work. And today, our topic is dismantling barriers to disability justice, an incredibly important topic. And we hope that you will learn more about both the struggles of the people who are incarcerated as well as the work that the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project does. So just to give an overview, we have, to let you know who's speaking today, we have Alexandra Morgan Kurtz, who is our Deputy Director, followed by one of our clients, Nadirah Shaw, followed by Evangeline Wright, who is an attorney in our Central Pennsylvania office, and then followed by James Savage, and then we have some comments by Nick Presley. So as we're talking, feel free to, again, I see some people in the chat, feel free to introduce yourself, where you're from. If you're from an organization, if you're a family or a loved one of someone who's incarcerated, feel free to share that in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Alexandra Morgan-Kurtz. Alex is PILP's deputy director. We're really delighted that she was promoted this past year. Alex is a top-notch attorney, compassionate and zealous advocate on behalf of those that we work with, and also has been our go-to person relating to the ADA for physical and psychiatric disabilities, our clients with physical and psychiatric disabilities for many years. And she's really, and Alex has really encouraged us to think about the ADA, how we can use that as a powerful tool. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alex.
All right, thank you so much. So hi, everyone. As Suming said, I am Alexandra Morgan-Kurtz, they, she. I am a white femme presenting person with long brown and purple hair, and I'm wearing a black shirt and a teal shirt. You may also at some point during my presentation see a small black fluffy cat fly across the screen. I'm going to try to keep him contained, but you never know. So I'm going to start us off by giving you a little bit of background on disability justice, that framework, as well as the ADA itself, and talk about some of the work that we do, including the cases that we've litigated. So the first thing that I always say to people when I'm talking about disability justice is that we all need to take a step back and reframe our thinking when it comes to disability access, because so much of our culture and society comes at everything from a very, very ableist perspective. And what that means is that able-bodied individuals see society as the default right way to do things as long as they can access things without taking into consideration the needs of others. And that has led to the burden frequently being placed on marginalized populations, especially those people who are disabled, to request access, to demand accommodations, and to put all of the effort and work into finding their place in the more common society. And that's not where we need to be. The framework we need to come at things from is the fact that every time you do something, you need to take the steps to think about, is what you're doing accessible to others? We at PILP have been working to continually improve how we do things, and taking steps such as making sure to have interpreters, have captioning at events. I'm sure there's more things that we could do. So if there's ever anything that in our work you see that there's something we could do to make things more accessible, please reach out. But one big thing that we've done over the past year or so is to really take a very strong look at how we manage our intake processes to make sure that our intake process itself is more accessible to individuals with disabilities. So our intake is primarily through the lens of written letters, which has a lot of ways that's problematic and inaccessible. So we have taken steps to make sure that whenever individuals come across our plate, we make sure that we try to communicate with them in the ways that best meet their needs and provide a variety of options, and constantly ask the questions to them of what else can we do to best serve you? What else can we do to make sure that we are providing you with information that is accessible and understandable to you? So whether that be some of our wonderful paralegals reading letters and giving advice over the phone to clients instead of just sending the letter, and taking that time to walk through that, whether it be meeting with people in person because phones just are not as accessible to those individuals. Those are all steps that we've tried to take to increase access. And that's really something that I wish prisons and jails and all of public agencies would embody a little bit more of, which is why I wanted to start there, of pointing out that even we who are doing this work are constantly looking for ways to improve. And the kind of next foundational point here is the fact that disability is such a really, really broad concept and really applies to many, many, many people. More people are disabled than you think. People who meet me on the street, who interact with me at work, would not assume that I am someone who identifies as disabled, but I do, for a number of ways that impact my life and my day on a daily basis, sometimes hour by hour, minute by minute, sometimes maybe not as much, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm disabled and I need accommodations in my everyday life. And that is very true of many of our clients and many of the people who are in prisons and jails. And so one thing that we are constantly doing in our work is communicating with prisons and jails and letting them know that disability is more than what society thinks of as the default. It's more than just individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. It's more than individuals with visual impairments. And it's also more than individuals who have mobility impairments. So transitioning and using that to look at the ADA itself. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is a statute that was passed in 1990 with pretty bipartisan support after a lot of really zealous advocacy and activism from disabled folks. This was not Congress decided to do a good thing. This was very much pushback from the disabled communities to make sure that they had access to society. And we're not ostracized in the ways that many marginalized communities frequently are. And when that statute was first passed, Congress had a really good idea of what they wanted, and the courts decided that they didn't like that, and they really, really narrowed it. And in something that hasn't happened very often in US history, Congress actually then in 2008 amended the Americans with Disabilities Act to make it more clear that they really did intend the ADA to be as broad, far-reaching, and as impactful as the language said originally, and to make it even more broad, and to specifically tell courts that they were making the ADA too narrow. And so whenever you're looking at whether or not the ADA applies to a situation, it's really important to remember those two very broad points, that a lot of people are disabled in a lot of different ways, and that Congress intended the ADA to protect every single one of those folks. Whether or not you yourself think that someone's disabled doesn't really matter. So what matters under the scope of the ADA, and I do want to make a little asterisk here of, I'm going to talk a lot from the legal standards, but I do want to point out that there are a lot of individuals that under the ADA would be identified as disabled who are entitled to the protections of the ADA, but are not individuals who themselves would identify as disabled. There are very strong communities and cultures who have taken a stance that they do not want their community to be identified as disabled. And so for those, so whenever you're interacting with people, whether or not you think that the ADA covers them, you should only identify folks as they identify. So that's one thing that we're very, I try to be very careful with as well, but I may make some slip ups as I'm talking about the law. So the ADA defines disability as any physical or mental impairment that has a significant impact on a major life activity. And when Congress explained how broad they meant the ADA to be, major life activity encompasses literally everything a person does in so many ways: living, communicating, working, thinking, your respiratory processes, your circulatory processes. And so when you look at it from that lens, if you have, it kind of boils down to, if you have any physical or mental impairment that has an impact on your life, you probably qualified as disabled under the ADA and are entitled to those protections. And so that is something that we're constantly working to remind prisons and jails about. And we frequently get clients who write to us saying, yeah, so you told me to use the ADA accommodation process, and the jail came back and said I wasn't disabled. I didn't qualify for ADA protections. And that's one of those moments where we have to do advocacy and tell the prison, yeah, you know, just because you don't think celiac disease is something that could qualify someone as disabled who needs an accommodation, that's not what the law says. That is something that has a significant impact on their major life activity, their digestive processes. So if they need an accommodation for a different diet so that they do not experience the harmful physical impacts of their condition impacting their ability to participate in programs to go about their day, that's someone who needs accommodations. That's an accommodation that a public agency is required to give. And that is the second part of the ADA, is that the ADA applies to literally everything that a public agency does. It's not just, oh, we had a class, we have to make sure you have access to classes. It means everything that happens in a prison or jail. People who have disabilities should have equal access and benefit to those services, and to that thing that is happening. However you want to, whatever word you want to use to describe it, disabled folks should have access. And that is something that is very hard for prisons and jails to understand. So sometimes you have to get creative in communicating with them about those issues. And because of how broad the ADA is, it is a really essential tool in our work because the standard in the ADA is the exact same whether or not you're incarcerated, and whether, no matter what your disability is. And so that means that while a lot of constitutional rights and other statutory rights really are impacted and people who are incarcerated have less access to them, have harder standards, the ADA is not like that. It is the same. And so a lot of times we'll be working with clients, and it's really important for us to take a look at what situation they're facing and see if there's some way that we can use the ADA to get them better access to improve their conditions, even if it doesn't present as an obvious ADA problem. So one example of this, and this is again kind of like a question of identity. So I have, some of my clients who are trans also have gender dysphoria. They were fine with using the ADA and identifying as disabled. Not all trans folks are okay with that. So always something to be careful of. But for some of my trans clients, both of them, we included ADA claims in their litigation because that was a way to get them access to things that would be really hard under a constitutional standard. So for example, we're working with our one client, Shane Daly, to get them access to more gym equipment at their prison. There's not a constitutional standard that says you have a right to gym equipment. But because they are incarcerated at a female institution, the gyms there have less equipment than the gyms at male prisons. And it's really important for our client who's non-binary to masculinize, make their body more masculine, I can't say that word, their appearance. And so for them, an accommodation for their gender dysphoria to allow them to feel comfortable enough to leave their cell and to go and interact with people is the ability for them to be able to work out more and increase their muscle mass. And so one of the things that we included was an ADA request for more gym equipment. That case is ongoing. Don't know, whether that will ultimately win the day or not, but that was just another one example of how that happens. And that's a tool that we can use. Another thing that has come up that people wouldn't think of as being an obvious accommodation is we have clients frequently who have either anxiety or some kind of trauma or have been diagnosed with shy bladder syndrome, such that it's really hard for them to comply with random drug testing because they literally can't when there's others around. But that is something that it's a physical or mental impairment that impacts a major life activity. And at the prison, they need to be able to urinate on command for these drug tests. So there's ways to ask for accommodations, whether it be behind a closed door. For some of our clients, they've in the past had accommodations of being able to have a catheter so that they could comply with those drug tests. All of these things that don't seem like what media portrays as being disabilities or disability accommodations that are really, really beneficial to improving our clients' needs so that they can then have access to prisons and stuff without going too far afield. And my time is actually already almost up. So I did just want to highlight invisible disabilities real quick. Because one thing that is very, very crucial in prisons and jails is the fact that we have a very, very high number of individuals with mental illness who are incarcerated and put in prisons and jails because of their mental illness. And while they're in prisons and jails, frequently suffer as a result of their conditions. And those individuals have a lot of ways that they can get better accommodations in prisons and jails because of the ADA. One example is a case that we previously litigated, which was the Snyder case, which was an individual with schizophrenia and a lot of other mental health conditions, which impacted his ability to understand instructions from the guards. And so a guard told him to wear a name tag and he didn't understand it. The guard circled back around 10 minutes later, again, asked him to wear a name tag, still didn't understand it. And ultimately the guards, to enforce their rules, then used force against him, pepper sprayed him, and placed him in solitary because he was not following the rules. That was all an individual that those were all issues that were able to be addressed under the ADA. I'm going to toss it. I have more to talk about. We can always ask questions later. That took a little longer than I expected. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Suming.
Thank you so much, Alex. I always appreciate their very eloquent layout of the law and some examples. So now I'm really thrilled to introduce Nadirah Shaw, who is one of PILP's clients. Alex didn't discuss, but Alex, along in partnership with the Abolitionist Law Center, represented Nadirah Shaw on a case and successfully obtained both accommodations and compensation and some accommodations for them, as well as needed medical care. So we are really delighted to introduce Nadirah Shaw, who this is pre-recorded because she is currently still incarcerated.
My name is Savage and Nadirah Shaw. I have been incarcerated now for 28 years. My physical disabilities are I have to use a walker, a wheelchair, and a cane to get around. I need 2 hip replacements. I have herniated knee disease and herniated disc disease, herniated hip disease, curvature of the spine, bulging disc from L3 to S1. I have been dealing with chronic pain now for more than the last, I'd say, 18, 19 years with no help. When I started working with PILP, I was going through a situation at STI Cambridge Springs where still I could not get anything for pain, chronic pain. And I was on a pain medication called Lyrica. Lyrica is a pain pill that helps with fibromyalgia and neuropathy, which are nerve pain. And they will also take my wheelchair from me and give it back whenever they feel like they wanted to punish me. Punishment for me was to take my wheelchair away from me, which would then not allow me to get from point A to point B because of the pain that I was in. I could not walk. I could not use anything else to help me get from point A to point B, so I would basically stay inside most of the time. So I was being denied access to a handicap room, handicap accessible room. I was being denied meals on a unit when I could not make it to the dining hall because of them taking my wheelchair, and I was denied access to go to school because of me not having a wheelchair to make it to school. With my medical conditions and with my knees buckling, it has caused me to fall multiple times, with one of the times leading to me having a broken ankle, which I broke in 2 places and tore the ligament. And now I have 9 screws and a plate in from that fall. When I broke my ankle at SCI Cambridge Springs, it was after when Cambridge Springs had denied me pain medication, Lyrica, and access to my wheelchair, and I had a lot of appointments that day, and I had to walk and make it to those appointments because they were mandatory appointments. And when by the end of the night is when my legs buckled and I broke my ankle. 2014 is when I started asking your office for help with some of the issues that I was having at Cambridge Springs. Once I got in touch with PILP, I started being retaliated against but with staying in contact with your office, I started getting some of the advocates from your office advocating for me, and I did get my Lyrica, and I did get the use of a wheelchair, and they did put me in another room where I can have access to the toilets and to make it more easier for me. It was important for me to bring a lawsuit against Cambridge Springs for ADA and for pain medication, not only for myself, but also for my fellow inmates, and also to make a statement that I'm not going to allow you to treat me any kind of way. That, yes, I may be in prison, but I have rights as a prisoner, and I need the proper medical care. I am still having issues at Muncie now with the Muncie, SEI Muncie medical department, with not doing anything, with there being one doctor here for the prison. Your office then filed a lawsuit against SEI Cambridge Springs and followed through with it and was very successful with it. It was part of my settlement agreement that they could not take the Lyrica or the wheelchair from me. Life in prison with disabilities is very hard. Being told that I cannot go more than about 10 steps before I'm in pain, when I have to lean over on my walker, I have to stop and lean over on my walker and wait a while before I take more steps. Being in a wheelchair and I have to go somewhere, it's hard to find somebody to push you, even when there's people that have jobs to be wheelchair pushers, which are other inmates. There's not enough accommodation rooms for people with disabilities because of how the prison is built. Medical just don't care about people with disabilities. The showers are not equipped. On the unit that I'm on, the showers is not really equipped for handicapped people. They have the railing bar in there, but as far as to be able to sit down, you have to put a plastic chair in there yourself in order to take a shower. If I can tell DLC about how I feel about being disabled in their prison system, I would ask them to take a walk in my shoes for a day and let me know how they feel. The help that I have received from your office, and, I would recommend anybody that is having any problems in prison to contact your office to try to get help.
Thank you so much, and I just want to really express my gratitude to Ms. Shaw for having the courage to speak with us today, as well as just even coming forward and bring a lawsuit. So we are very grateful. Now we're going to turn it over to Evangeline Wright. Evangeline is a staff attorney who recently joined us. She is based in our Central Pennsylvania office after an excellent career at Mid-Penn Legal Services, and we're really delighted that she's joined us, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Sue Ming. My name's Evangeline Wright. I use she, her. I'm a Caucasian female with medium length brown hair and a really cozy brown sweater because all of a sudden it feels like winter. And I'm going to share some PowerPoint slides here. Give me just a minute. All of you should be seeing a slide that says, what does it mean to be an incarcerated person with a disability? We just heard a really moving description from Ms. Shaw about the challenges she faces as a person with a mobility impairment in a carceral setting. I'd like to sit a little longer with what it means to be incarcerated with a disability and look at some different kinds of disabilities. Ms. Shaw talked about some of the challenges that she faces with her mobility impairment. We're looking at a picture here of a jail cell. This happens to be a Philadelphia Department of Prison cell. It's a small white room, looks like maybe cinder block walls, has a metal toilet in the corner attached to a sink. The toilet doesn't really have much of a seat on it. There's a protruding shelf from the wall that's at about desk height. It's a very deep shelf. Looks like there's some bins in there for people to keep things in. And then there's a very stripped down metal bunk bed with a ladder going to the top bunk, no rails, and a very, very thin mattress. And as you look at this room, I'd like you to think a little bit about the challenges that somebody with a mobility impairment would face in navigating this room. To begin with, it's a very, very small space. If you put a wheelchair in there, if you put a walker in there, perhaps you need to put both in there because you use both of those things. There's not going to be much floor space left. This is clearly a cell designed for two people. You may be navigating issues with a roommate at that point. There's a lot of sharp corners in there that would have to be navigated. The toilet does not look like that would be something easy to use if you had a mobility impairment. I'd like to switch gears for a moment and think about what it would be like to live in this cell as somebody with a vision impairment. Again, there's a lot of sharp corners. There's a lot of metal to navigate. There's a window, and it's a long, narrow window, but I don't see a shade. I don't see a curtain there. Some people with vision impairments can be very, very sensitive to light, can get headaches if they can't control the light sources that are coming into them. There's no way to cover up that window. You can't really see from this picture, but it's very, very likely that there is no light switch in this room, that the light to this cell may be controlled from outside the cell from some central location. So it's quite likely that if you're sitting in this cell, you're not able to control the overhead light either. And again, if you're very sensitive to light, it's going to cause you pain and difficulty. Let's think about what it might be like to be in this cell as a person with opioid use disorder. PILP hears from a lot of people that maybe have been able to manage their opioid use disorder out in the community through medication. They become incarcerated, and the institution is not willing to provide them with the medication that they need to control their opioid use disorder. So one thing that a lot of people face when they first become incarcerated is they're withdrawing from opioid use. That's going to include symptoms like nausea, vomiting and diarrhea, irritability, hot and cold flushes, and sweating, and disturbed sleep. And as you look at this cell, these are challenges that somebody would have to navigate, probably with the presence of a roommate. Probably if they are vomiting, that's something they're going to be doing out in the open. They're going to be using that little toilet there in the corner. They're not going to have easy access to a shower to clean themselves up afterwards. If they're sweating, they're probably just going to be laying in their sweat on their bunk. If they're irritable, that's going to affect their ability to navigate that relationship with their roommate. And finally, because so many people who are incarcerated suffer from serious mental illness, let's just think for a moment what it might be like to live in this cell as a person with serious mental illness. Again, you're not going to be able to control the stimulus that are coming into you. There's going to be light. There's a lot of hard surfaces in this room that are going to bounce sound. Carceral settings tend to be quite noisy. You're not going to be able to control the sound that's coming into you. You may be navigating a relationship with the roommate, and all of these things are going to cause you a lot of difficulty. I want to highlight another issue that we tend to hear a lot about from people that write to us, and Ms. Shaw actually mentioned as well. You may have caught that she has both a mobility impairment. She also suffers from chronic pain. It's very, very common for the people that write to PILP to have multiple disabilities, and they're dealing with the intersection of disabilities. That can include things like chronic diseases. If you suffer from diabetes, you may also have a mobility impairment that may be related to your diabetes, but requires different accommodations. You're going to hear from Mr. Savage in a little bit, who's another one of our clients, and he has both a vision impairment and a mobility impairment. Section of these disabilities can create additional challenges for people as they try to accommodate their needs. Some of the issues that we tend to see people writing to us about include a lack of communication between correctional staff. Frequently, somebody on medical staff might identify somebody as having a disability, but that information doesn't necessarily get communicated to security staff who may not be aware of a person's needs, may not be communicated to the person that actually needs to purchase the accommodations for someone. Frequently, we see people, a good example of this is maybe medical staff might write a prescription for eyeglasses. We've looked at medical records where there are multiple prescriptions for eyeglasses over a period of years, and the person still does not have eyeglasses. They've been waiting for a very long time. Another issue with communication is communication between agencies. When somebody is transferred within the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, they may have secured accommodations at one facility that may not be available to them at another facility. Lack of education for correctional staff regarding the rights of those with disabilities is a very, very common problem that we hear about. Frequently, we'll hear people say that staff told them just to ask for assistance from another incarcerated person, maybe assistance pushing a wheelchair, maybe assistance writing a request to staff slip. To begin with, this is an abdication of responsibility on the part of the institution. It creates very significant difficulty for the incarcerated person who's being put in the position of having to ask another incarcerated person for those accommodations. It makes people vulnerable to exploitation, and it probably creates expectations of compensation. Another frequent issue that we tend to see people writing us about is irregular access to necessary medications. This can include situations where maybe somebody has been moved from a general population unit to a restricted housing unit, and the medications that they had in the general population are not available to them for a period of time. For some conditions, for some disabilities, regular access to that medication is crucial for managing the disability. Another issue we tend to see is that people don't receive medications on the schedule that has been prescribed. So some medications might need to be taken a certain number of hours apart. Some medications might need to be taken with food. When somebody doesn't receive things on that schedule, it can have very serious health effects, and it can exacerbate the effects of a disability. Our goal with PILP is always to center the client's experience, and we spend a lot of time building those relationships. Alex highlighted some of the ways that we try to make our services accessible to people. We also try to very much center somebody's own identification of what their needs are. Part of the reason for that is advocacy can have very unintended consequences in a carceral setting. There have been situations where somebody has come to us and we look at their situation and think, really, it might be very helpful to this person to be in an accessible housing unit. But after discussion with that person, we abandon that as an advocacy goal because maybe they've shared with us that to move to a different cell block might mean losing a support network that they've built up and that they rely upon. That can play out in ways that could seem very hidden as well. Sometimes we'll talk to people about maybe better delivery of medications and say, look, we could advocate for you to try to improve the way that your medications are delivered. And again, that can have a domino effect that could lead to potentially a change of cell block, potentially a change of cellmate that might actually make their life more difficult. In addition to building relationships with our clients, we also work hard at building relationships with other service agencies. Recently, we were able to begin building a relationship with Vision Services of Washington Green. This came about because Vision Services visited the state correctional institution in Greene County to meet with some incarcerated people who have vision impairments and were sufficiently concerned by what they saw to connect with us and to now work with us on engaging in advocacy for those clients. It's very helpful because it helps us identify more people that we might not have reached. Certainly we've gotten clients from them that did not know before reaching out to them that we were available. It also lends some weight to the types of accommodations that we can request. Another thing that we engage in is gathering information. Pennsylvania Right to Know law is a fantastic law that allows us, or really anybody, to request information from state and local agencies. Recently, we've been working on a project to get disability accommodation policies from some of the local county prisons in our northeastern region, with an eye to engaging in more systemic advocacy based on what we find out from those policies. And then finally, I want to talk about some of the forms, the non-litigation forms of advocacy that we engage in. We provide a lot of advice to people about how to make accommodation requests, including providing specific language they can use and discussing with them and helping them formulate the types of accommodation requests they want to make. And we also write advocacy letters. We've been doing a lot of work with opioid use disorder. In the last year, we've done at least 7 advocacy letters related to opioid use disorder, including letters for individual clients and a letter for more systemic advocacy to try to create change at county facility. And we're starting to see some success with that. And we've also recently done an advocacy letter for Mr. Savage, who you're going to hear from directly quite soon. Mr. Savage has both a mobility impairment and a vision impairment. And we are looking for accommodations for him to help him be able to know what paperwork he's receiving. In the past, he's been required to sign paperwork that he's unable to read. We're asking for accommodations so that he can use facility kiosks or a Department of Corrections issued tablet. Increasingly, a lot of functions within the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections are handled via tablet. If you have a vision impairment, it can be very difficult to access those functions. We're asking for ways for him to help control his physical environment. He needs a lock to lock up his possessions. Typically, Department of Corrections people are provided with code locks that aren't accessible to people with visual impairments. He also needs a watch, a talking watch, so he can know the time, because currently, without the ability to know the time, he risks missing count, which can have disciplinary consequences for him. He risks missing appointments, and he risks missing meals. We're also asking for clear identification of his disability. Communication among staff regarding disability can put him at risk for inappropriate disciplinary interactions. He will feel safer and be more secure in his environment if he has signage on his cell door that identifies him as a person with a visual impairment, notification on his inmate ID so he can quickly show that to corrections officers, and identification on his clothing that identifies him as blind. And on that note, I'm going to turn this back over. Let me stop my screen share here. There we go. And I'm going to turn this back over so that we can hear from Mr. Savage.
So we are now going to, thank you so much, Evangeline. And what we're going to do now is we are going to turn it over to James Savage, who is currently incarcerated in the Department of Corrections. We are really delighted that one of his family members is here to join us this evening. And again, we are so grateful that he has agreed to speak tonight.
Here, I've been incarcerated in the House of Corrections for a little over 17 years. I'm 57 years old. I'm currently located in Phoenix, SCI Phoenix in Pennsylvania. I'm completely blind. I use a wheelchair to get around. I try to walk a little bit, but I fall more than I can walk. I've been blind since 2 bot surgeries for cataract surgery, which blew out my retinas. And I slowly lost all vision. I'm in a wheelchair because when I got transferred to Huntington, they didn't take in consideration that I'm blind, and they decided to put me on an upper tier top bunk where I fell. And I have cages in my back, and I injured myself. And they don't want to take care of the pain. They don't want to take care of it. They don't want to recognize anything about that. And it kind of slowly graduated till I'm in a wheelchair getting around mostly. Being in a wheelchair, knowing that you need to get it, use it to get around, and being blind, using a wheelchair, it's a nightmare. It's hard to get anybody to push you anywhere. It's hard to get outside. It's just difficult. And being blind, I can't see paperwork that I'm signing. I miss activities. I miss call-outs because I don't know what time it is. I get up in the middle of the night, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be up now or I got a couple hours left to sleep. And it's just hard. Right now they got me in a handicap cell, which is, I call my torture chamber because I get caught everywhere. Trying to get from my bed to the door, I either hit the table's got a stool for some reason on the side of it, and the sink sticks out 3/4 of the way of the cell. It's like an obstacle course. I guess it's alright if you're just in a wheelchair, but if you're blind in a wheelchair, it's a nightmare. I had a talking watch. I tried getting batteries for it. Finally, they put batteries in it. They engraved the back, and when they gave me the watch back, it didn't work right. And then they tried to give me a vibrating watch for the death. Well, I can't see to set it or tell what time it is or nothing like that. I've been waiting 4 months to get a talking watch back, and I'm completely lost without it. To know what time it is, to know if it's daytime, nighttime, call-outs, just to have the same light as everybody else has, to know what time it is. I get up sometimes in the middle of the night not knowing if I still have sleep time left, and so I stay awake, and here I'm up for 3-4 hours waiting for them to do count time, if they do count time. I don't know if I should be out of bed. They do bring the trays to me. And I have to jump out of bed real quick and put my shoes on to get in the wheelchair to go over and grab my tray at the door. And it's hard. People that can see, they can buy combination locks, master locks, and they can lock up their foot locker. They can lock up their cabinet. I can't do none of that. I can't use a combination lock. I can't even see my own hands. I have to give people my information to help me look up my account balances on the kiosk, my personal PIN number, my ID number, my code name that I put down. It's supposed to be secret. Just about half the block knows it now. I cannot use a tablet. I cannot download music like everybody else does, send emails, anything like that. I got over 300 emails saved up because they give you so many email units. I can't use them. It'd be better if they just gave me phone time. At least I can use the phone time. They take no consideration. I have to find someone that can read, that has time to help me fill out forms, like sick calls, which I could pretty much get somebody to do, but the combination request forms are kind of hard because nobody knows what the rights are. Some facilities don't even know about the talking book thing, and they were telling me at Huntington, for example, they never seen the talking books. They said, well, it might be confiscated, but file paper, fill out a request form to me, and we'll get it back for you. But it's not my job to educate their staff. It's their job to educate their staff. I shouldn't have to tell people, look, I'm blind. And I hear a little snicker. I can't write letters to my family or my friends. I have to go on the phone all the time, which means I have to buy phone time. I have no job because they won't give me a job. So I get GLP, which is $17 a month. I'm supposed to buy my hygiene stuff with that, any extra foods I want with that, and phone time. It's just not enough, especially with having to call my kids, my sister, my friend. my aunt. It costs a lot. It's very expensive. It's hard to describe to anybody what I'm going through because you couldn't understand it. Even if you put a blindfold on your eyes and tried walking around pretending you're blind, you can't understand it because you know you can always cheat, but that blindfold eventually comes off. Mine don't. And people sit there and say, well, I understand this. No, you don't understand. You don't have a clue. I sit in the room, no matter how many people around me, I'm in the dark. People are going around playing cards and other games, and they have game nights and stuff where they win prizes. Well, I can't play because they have nothing for the blind. So I get ignored. I reached out to PILP for help against the medical system and the DOC and the care that we get here, because it just, no matter how many grievances you file, it does not matter because the DOC will not side against the DOC. Unless you have outside help, you're pretty much left in the dark like me. So far, PILP has helped me file an advocacy letter about getting my talking watch back, about helping me getting a guide stick, certain paperwork being done, help with getting the key locks, because I just keep banging my head against the wall. I filled it out. I had someone fill it out for me, and they actually had me go down and sign off on it because they said I had to prove that I'm completely blind. I just wish they all had to go through it for a week with not knowing that they can see and walk ever again. Then then they could begin to understand how I am, how I feel. Because you just can't describe to them by words because they can't grasp it. I would tell the DOC that they should pick up on the responsibilities. You want to hold us incarcerated, then you must meet our special needs. Otherwise, let us go home. You just can't keep ignoring us.
Thank you, Mr. Savage. We just so appreciate your sharing your experiences and your story with us. It takes such great courage to come forward, and we really appreciate it, so that it helps all of us understand better what you're experiencing and those who are in similar positions as you. So now what we're going to do, I want to thank everyone for attending, and we have one more person who's going to speak, and that's Nick Presley, who is a PILP board member.
Thank you. Hi, y'all. My name is Nick Presley, he, they pronouns. I live in State College, Pennsylvania. I am a Black man of cinnamon complexion with blue-green hair, a close-cropped gray beard and glasses, and I'm wearing a collared black patterned shirt. I spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania working in criminal justice reform as a formerly incarcerated activist. But my first encounter with PILP was actually in 2020. I was serving time on a county sentence here in State College, Pennsylvania, of questionable legality. And y'all, that was when COVID hit. I was incarcerated when COVID hit the US shores and everything shut down. My birthday was actually the last day at the jail allowed any visitors into Center County Correctional Facility. And it was terrifying living in that kind of atmosphere where we didn't really know what to expect with COVID. The jail was not testing anyone. The guards refused to wear masks, and they were vehemently cracking down on anyone who protested any of those lack of measures to deal with what we knew from the news was a deadly worldwide pandemic. My partner got in touch with PILP to let them know kind of some of the things that were going on. And through the advocacy of the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project, we were able to see some massive changes happen in Center County Correctional Facility. So it was my honor just a couple years later when they asked me to join the board of directors for this organization. And now I get to see kind of from the inside all of the great work that's happening across the Commonwealth, whether it's helping folks who are dealing with disability issues or any of the other violations of our civil rights. It's an honor to see them partnering or us partnering with some organizations I have worked for in the past to continue to push forward some of the work that I've been able to do in the past, and really recognize the impact of this organization and the great staff who are members of this organization for all the work that they do. But this would not be possible without the support of folks like you. And so I'd love to end this with a little bit of recognition for the work that has been done in the past and the work that will be done in the future, and implore you to please check out the website that is being dropped in chat right now. Please click on that link, go to the website and donate. Just a couple of bucks will help this organization continue to do the great work and continue to move forward into perpetuity, because we have a lot of work to do in Pennsylvania, y'all. We can't do it without you.
Thank you so much, Nick. We really appreciate that. And again, we appreciate all of you attending this evening. And if you would be interested in making a donation, we always very much appreciate it. You may not know, but litigation is actually really expensive. So even to do a deposition, which you really need to do, it's a vital tool in the lawsuit process. 1 hour can cost us $200 at a minimum. So anyway, we're very appreciative of all of you joining us and learning more about it. And to the extent that you feel comfortable and inspired, we appreciate all forms of support. So before we sign off, I did want to do some important thank yous. The first is I really have to, again, from my heart, thank Nadirah Shaw and James Savage. Really appreciate their being willing to speak with us all this evening. In addition, I wanted to thank the board of directors for the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project. I want to thank our amazing ASL interpreters this evening, Tara and Suzanne. And I also wanted to thank all the people behind the scenes. So you don't see them, but they are the ones managing everything. So we have Ben Bowens, Greg Paulo. We also have Alexandra Morgan Kurtz, Evangeline Wright, and last but not least, Juliana Brown. So it's been a great team putting this event together. So we are really delighted to have you all join. We hope that you will stay connected with us. If you haven't already, please follow us on social media. Please sign up for our listserv. And we look forward to connecting with you in the future as well. Thank you so much.